city. I'm sure there's some attorneys in Comal County or even Bear County that could be hired. I only assume that we're paying travel expenses for Mr. Sweeney to come to these meetings. So that's not fiscally responsible. I'm also just glancing over the budget. I see lots of employees with awesome compensation packages. I mean, this is like a dream job. Medical insurance, I can't remember the last time I had medical insurance. Dental insurance, life insurance, short-term disability, retirement, excellent. I think it's great that you're treating your employees well, but how many employees do you need? And are we being fiscally responsible with the medical insurance premium? Just to give you an example, couldn't that be lower? Could we cut some costs here? I think it's important that when you're budgeting, like take into account the average Jane and Joe in Comal County, and what are they making, and what do they have access to? I'm just seeing this trend where government employees seem to be, it's like government employees are competing with the private sector, and jobs in the government are very well, they have awesome compensation packages. So I think that's a problem, especially when it comes to spending. And let's see, I have a few more minutes. What else can we talk about? Well, I'll just talk about, because I'd like to use the most of my time. Oh, I would like also to talk about as far as the budget, like this setup is, can you get a better setup for public members who want to speak before you? I mean, Diane had no idea that you were waiting on her. She can't hear anything. Why isn't she in the room? Can we get a bigger room? Can we get more chairs? Can we make this more accommodating for the public? Is it funny? Is it funny?
It costs additional dollars to get extra space.
Oh, okay, so to get extra space for the public to speak, so we're really gonna scrutinize that, but you have these, I mean, outstanding compensation packages for employees. I mean, here's a chief appraiser, $146,778. I mean, that's outstanding. And how many people are we paying in that category? I mean, this is just like page after page after page after page of employees.
Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, are we allowed to speak if we didn't sign up?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's citizen comment period.
Well, I mean, I'm Jackie Musto, I just wanted to
Ma'am, when
say.
you come up here, we can hear you. Yeah, please, thank you.
I can't help it. Yeah, I mean, can you please just consider, we all have to cut our budgets.
Yeah.
Why can you not? It's as simple as that. I mean, thank you.
Last call for budget hearing, citizen comment. Is there anyone else there? Okay, all right. Excellent. We'll close agenda item number 1. We'll move to agenda item number 2. Any board members have any communication they would like to have during this session? Okay. Move on to agenda item number 3. Oh, did I skip it? Oops. Sorry. My fault.
Well, I'm going to say. Now you want to,
All right. Apologize about that. Okay, agenda item number 2 is presentation of the Comal Appraisal District proposed 2023 budget.
Yes, sir. So, the total for the 2023 preliminary budget
Can y'all show it?
May not.
tax free.
We had copies for everybody.
there were copies outside, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think
Education.
tax free.
Dues and subscriptions. 4,000.
So the total proposed budget is
Oh,
gonna be
it's right there.
$5,531,764.94. The first line item is going to be employee expenses. And there's a lot of them here, I mean, you can scroll down each one, but there's gonna be a lot. That's where the biggest increase in the budget is at a 17.4% increase. That dollar amount added for that line item is $566,815.22.
So one of the comments that was made was how many chief appraiser positions we have on the budget, and the answer to that would be just a singular.
Just a singular, and the chief appraiser's salary is $146,000, that's the total cost to the district.
Correct.
The salary for that chief appraiser was $112,100. So the next line item we're gonna be at is going to be the mortgage for the building. There is a 0% increase that's stated exactly the same from 2022 to 2023. Telephones and utilities, that is going from 19,000 to 27,820, a difference of $8,820, and an increase of 46.42%.
Is that and that's a pass, I assume that's a pass along, we're not increasing anything in the services we're providing, that's just our cost of utilizing
Right.
the service.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So line item for 7,400, excuse me, is education. Right now, that's proposed to go from 34,000 in 2022 up to 52,000 in 2023. That's an $18,000 difference, or a 52.94% increase.
And what does education cover?
Sure, that's going to cover the appraisers going to their state required courses to become a certified appraiser through the state. We do have a lot of new employees that require the full 4-year courses as of right now.
Okay, and those are continuing education credits required by the state to perform those services?
Once you get your certification, after that, there is continuing education that is required.
Okay.
I'd like to point out a little bit of that, just recently it was provided for free, so there are credits they can obtain at no cost.
Right.
And there was an attempt to make this past couple months to utilize those resources.
Great. Okay.
So director's expenses, that stayed the same at 3,000. Dues and subscriptions, that's line item 7,500, is going from 10,100 up to 14,000, $3,900 difference, or a 38.61% increase.
Can you give just a brief example of what those would include?
Yes. So, all of our subscriptions to the chamber, by board, IAAO, which are appraisal institutes, TAD, the Texas Association of Appraisal Districts, TDLR, which is where we get our licensings through, so. And also Marshall and Swift, which is, program, or excuse me, a national publication where we get all of our cost information from year to year. Vehicles.
PWC's commercial storage.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So 7,600 is advertisement, that's going from 8,000 to 10,000, $2,000 difference, or 25% increase. In that advertisement, there are state required things we have to post in the paper that there's no option, we have to do that, so. So deeds and mapping, that's actually going from 1,200 down to 0. That's an old plotter that we have that's extremely out of date, so we're not gonna, you don't need to set money aside to service it, because we don't use it anymore. So capital expenses is going from 90,000 down to 82,750, which is a $7,250 decrease, or an 8.06% decrease.
Is that a function of life cycle costs? I mean, cause I know we invested a little bit last year on some computer equipment and some, it just gets out of date, becomes unusable.
Yeah, so all of our computers are on about a 6-year life cycle. So every year, we cycle out a percentage of our PCs to stay up to date and to where they can maintain all the software. It's usually around 7 or 8 PCs, and then obviously, we need to budget, new computers for new staff.
And out of there, a lot of what that went down is we cut from getting another vehicle this year, so the district's not getting any new vehicles. Maintenance, that's going from 14,000 to 10,000, $4,000 decrease, or a 28.56% decrease. Office supplies, 22,500 up to 27,700, 52% increase, or $5,200 increase, or a 23.11% increase. Now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, didn't we just we moved money from maintenance into office supplies?
Yeah, so in maintenance, there was janitorial supplies, we just, basically, the difference, we moved into office supplies because it's things that aren't really supplies that we buy, so just for, it's not really maintenance things.
So those are things like paper, pencils.
Yeah.
Postage, that's staying the same at 132,200. That's a high line item, but there's a lot of requirements of the district sending stuff to by mail or having it notified. The copier and printer, that's 8,000, it stayed the same with no increase. Vehicle expenses is staying the same at 15,500. Data processing is going from 3,400 to 22,500. That's a difference of 19,100, or a 561.76%.
So describe that a little bit.
Yeah, so the data processing is really all of our software costs. So on the low end, it's gonna be things like QuickBooks licensing, the payroll upgrade that we have to do. On the larger items, it's gonna be things like we're needing to switch to, we're switching to Office 365 subscriptions as opposed to standalone versions. The standalone versions are causing a lot of issues with the software that we're using right now because there's so many different versions over the lifespan of the PCs that we have. It is more expensive. The county is also making that transition to Office 365 in 2023, which is why we budgeted for this to begin with, to stay in line with them since we're on their network and,
Correct me if I'm wrong, we could lose some functionality if we
Yeah.
don't follow what they do.
if we stick with the standalone versions, we're gonna lose a lot of the, server storage that's backed up nightly because they're gonna start using OneDrive and things like that. So if we don't transition with them, we will lose functionality. That's the largest increase in that item, but it also includes things like Adobe Acrobat licenses. It's all software related.
Contract services, 8,600, so that's going from 840,600 to 1,063,100. That's a $222,500 difference. or a 26.46% increase. The biggest increases in that line item are gonna be legal fees, and we budgeted for HR legal this year that we hadn't in past years.
So just picking on a few of the highlights, the legal fee obviously came up at some of the citizen comments. I know we did look at an on-staff attorney,
We did.
and it still did not make sense financially,
Right.
because of the cost, whenever we started laying out the budget.
And really, if we had an on-staff attorney, if anything does go to trial, we still have to get a trial attorney in conjunction with the in-house attorney. So there'd still be additional costs, we really just have an in-house attorney.
Correct. Okay. Appraisal services. Can you break that out a little bit?
Appraisal services?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Pritchard and Abbott, they are our third-party appraisal firm. TransUnion, excuse me, that's a program where we use to get sales information. Candela is an outside individual that, we contract with to also get sales information. CoStar's for sales as well, and CAVS is a program with impacts to help value BPP accounts or business personal properties.
CAMA systems.
What about?
Yeah.
Oh, CAMA system, that's our appraisal software that we use to appraise where we put in all of our sketches, we make our cost adjustments, our income adjustments, and it helps us value the properties.
Okay.
CAMA system?
CAMA,
CAMA.
yeah, it's, line 529. Okay.
And laser processing, that's gonna be for all of our notices that I have to go out, we use them to frame all that, we use an outside company to print that.
And then, aerials.
Aerials are gonna be our pictometry overhead views, that's a set rate that didn't change from last year, because we're on a contract with them.
Okay. And how are those utilized?
If we cannot access a property, we will use aerial pictometry to take measurements, and basically appraise the property from the air.
Okay. Now, is that, I remember that we also looked at picking up changes.
We do that, it also implements a program called Change Finder, where it reconciles different aerials, and it tells us, out of all these properties, you're missing 20,000 improvements, and it highlights and sends us to them, so we can basically appraise them as we go. Oh, yeah, and both ways, if we're missing it, or if something was torn down, it'll show us that it's torn down, and we'll remove it from the tax roll.
All right.
Okay? Next one is insurance bonding and workers' comp, 30,500 up to 33,500. That's a $3,000 difference at 9.84%. Yeah, that's workers' compensation, I think our notaries are in there, stuff like that. Line 8,900 is appraisal review board, that is going from 124,960 to 168,560. That is a $43,600 difference, with the percent is 34.89% increase.
What's generally just more meetings, more meeting dates?
Yes, sir, we've been consistently having more ARB hearings, so it requires the board to be here more, so we pay them a per diem per day. More certified mailers that go out, things like that, so. And then the last one is contingency, that stayed the same at $10,000.
I should have asked this earlier, and I apologize. There was a question about medical insurance and retirement. Can you walk through those a little bit and how those are formulated? I believe those are part of an overall state system, if I'm not mistaken, that we.
Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah, Texas, well, it's through Texas Association of Counties. Not really, what are you really asking for?
How does that premium get identified, how does the district identify the appropriate medical insurance plan? How do we keep that cost down by partnering with other districts, those type of things?
Well, the matching for the retirement, the board approved that. That's.
Right.
So,
Or the insurance is what you're asking about, Texas Association of Counties is a company that uses all 254 counties in Texas to go into a pool so that we get the lowest rate available for insurance for our employees. And we, do not a bid, but a quote every year, and they are able to continue to give us better insurance for a lower price, I guess is what you would say. Was that the clarification you
Correct.
were looking for? Yes, sir. And so that's what that pool is for. And, that goes for the dental, all of the benefits in that portion are under that. Not the retirement, but all the medical insurance.
Okay. All right. And another retirement is similar. Can you go through that a little bit, just high level?
That's TCDRS, Texas County District Retirement System. The way it's been set up is that the employee puts in 7% of their own money along with Social Security. We do both, we're required to do both, we don't have a choice. So 7% of our salary goes into that, and then it's matched through TCDRS, at 2.5 times that, which was approved by the board. Then that money, it stays in the pool unless, or until you vest, and then that portion of the money, the match portion becomes the employee's. Prior to the 8 years, it is not your money. It sits in your account, but it is not really your money until you're vested. Then, once you retire, you get to pull that money out at whatever the rule is that you choose.
so in the regular meeting, there's actually, TCDRS is on there and there's a breakdown in there. You'll be able to look at it and see what our elected rate is and required rate and all that.
Okay. So how many employees, any other general questions? I feel like
No, I think you're going down the right path. We did budget for quite a few different employees, but don't know that we're planning on, filling those,
So as of right now, we're budgeted for 6 new employees. I did send out to John earlier in the week. The difference is, if you cut some of those new employees and what the percentage is, if you cut 5 of those new employees, short-term disability, and because short-term disability is new, the district has never offered that. And the PCs associated with those 5 employees, that'll decrease the budget's percent increase from 18.93% to 10.59%.
So, the employees that were requested, there's a senior appraiser, an appraiser, 2 data entry, I can't remember the.
2 data entry clerks.
And then, what was the last one?
Customer service.
Customer service. How do we feel we're operating at today's capacity, knowing that we still have 4 vacancies, kind of 3 vacancies right now, because it was an interim position? And do we feel like the recommendation is that once those are filled, we may not necessarily need all those additional seats? Or what?
So basically, we're 4 people short, are we performing at our highest quality as we can, our highest production as we can, being short? Basically, me and Melissa will go over this later. I mean, we analyzed the homestead exemptions and kind of did a projection based off of how many a day and what can be done, and it looks like we'll be able to be caught up with those, assuming no other ones come in by the middle of August. So, to your point, if we got another customer service position and we're performing at the right altitude or at the right speed, I guess I should say, that person might not have anything to do because they're gonna be caught up.
Okay, all right.
I know you and I have talked about our efficiency ratio. I think that's the word you're looking for.
Right.
Do we have the right people in the right places? I know you're
Right.
working on making some adjustments to that.
Yes, sir.
And so, position we would fill beyond those that are vacant would help us with that issue.
Right, and like I was getting, Melissa did with kind of the checks and balances, I think we need to know how productive we can be and how much can get done a day. And then at that point, if we're still not getting the job done, then yeah, we might need an employee, but I think we kind of need an assessment period to know where we need to improve at and where do we actually need those employees.
Another thought I had was, in each department, I know you have a lot of new employees and green staff in a lot of ways. Once those staff members are properly educated and trained to their highest level or capacity, and maybe we focus more on throwing dollars, a few dollars, maybe more training focused, can we get those positions that are already there, can we get them fully functional and,
Yeah, sure.
again, operating at a better level to do better work, to do faster work, to,
It's still gonna take them 3 years to get, at least 3 years to get their RPA, but we can get them to classes sooner, to get that education.
right.
Cause there's a time requirement that you have to work so many hours on the job while doing your courses, so they still have to meet that length time, but we can get them to class.
Do y'all know how many positions were not filled from last year's budget? I mean, year to year, how many people are y'all running short on? Like, how many empty positions are still available?
Yeah, so last time I ran the number, we had about a 25% turnover rate, and I think that's a really important number to know. And turning it over into the new administration is getting that to a healthy number, which will allow our staff to stay longer, be happier, work harder, be more efficient, be more knowledgeable and trained, which will allow them to get more work done, which will require us to have less staff. So that's an important.
So in a sense, it's a little premature, but we're also planning for 2023, which is 6 months away, so probably a little tough to make the call for this early on when we don't know yet who may be able to make the district optimally perform.
Well, under any new administration, the goal should be to get that to a healthy turnover.
Right.
Sure.
We also can't deny that we've been experiencing tremendous growth, and that means that there's a lot more appraisals coming in the door, and so we're asking our staff to do an inordinate amount of work on what they did. So I don't think we can be afraid just because of some comments that we're increasing our staff. We just need to be smart about how we're doing it, not overstaffing, because certainly you all have been bearing the brunt of an incredible amount of work lately, and so I wanna recognize that, as well.
Sure.
Another way of kind of looking at it, so IAAO standard is $2,500 parcels per employee.
Right.
If we only got one new employee next year, we would be at 3,000 parcels per employee. To the best of my knowledge, in Texas, most appraisal districts, they're at about 3,500 parcels per employee. So we're still kind of under that average. We're kind of in a sweet spot, so just another way of measuring it.
Great, thank you for that.
What seems to be the biggest pain points right now within the district as far as a staffing standpoint? I mean, you've got a couple senior people that are on the current budget, and we've got some lower level assistance help.
Right.
I don't want to use the word lower level, that's not what I mean by it, but organizationally, more support staff. Where do you feel like the greatest need is from your day-to-day operations?
You know, right now it's probably in appraisers, and that's hard too, because we're talking about how green these appraisers are. I wanna praise them, they've only been here 6 months and they're doing things I wouldn't expect them to be doing. And that's hard to judge because, like in the residential department, we're down appraisers, and also in the land department, so if we had those departments fully staffed, I think we would be able to fully get the job done, and there would be ease for, those departments. We are heavy on the customer service department right now, but that's because of the backlog of exemptions and, the quantity of protests that have came in and processing that. I think we're on track to get those exemptions caught up, and we're still one employee short in that department as well.
Probably not the cleanest way to look at this, and I know I'm putting you on the spot with these two numbers, but percentage based on new parcels from 21 to 22, what was that number? What's that percentage increase?
Where we have like 5,000 parcels a year.
It's an average of about 4,000 to 5,000 parcels per year that we increase, so we're about 109,000 in 2022, we would've been at about 104 to 105,000 in 2021. And then back, and, I mean, it varies obviously with development and things, but the average is about 4,000 to 5,000 parcels per year.
And that 3,000 parcels I told you per employee, that was me projecting to 2023.
Okay. And then assuming the continued
Right.
approximate steady growth.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I guess I'm just curious if you can, elaborate a little bit more, or if you know. This might be hard to qualify, but why we've had those empty staff positions, if we know we need it, you know? I mean, is it a lack of employees to fill those positions, you know, lack of qualified, people applying for those positions?
So just to kind of put it in perspective, when did we post was it a week ago we posted the land and the appraiser position?
We posted in the beginning of June.
The beginning of June, and for those two positions, we've gotten 3 applications. So
Yeah.
not a whole lot of people flooded for it.
Okay.
It's also difficult for us to hire brand new appraisers in the middle of the protest season because our staff are so strapped with the amount of workload that they're doing. It's difficult for us to get the training out there for those staff. So, which is one of the reasons why we decided to post at the beginning of June, have it open for 30 days with an August 1st hire date, which is the beginning of our reappraisal season. Or August 1st, I guess, would be the target hire date. That gets us past certification and allows the upper administration to be able to properly train any new staff that come in.
Have y'all done a salary study?
We
You know how you- you know how
we
you
reach out
pay?
to other districts and we get what they're paying, but not a professional salary study.
How many contract employees are we utilizing?
I mean, Pritchard and Abbott is a company that we use to appraise mostly commercial property, but we don't specifically employ individual contract employees.
So, well, I thought we were using like a customer service call
We have-
center.
we have
Well,
10 employees.
we'll use temps, we're not,
Sorry,
we only
temps.
use those when we had the flood of the protests coming in. We utilize those for a couple weeks and we don't have them.
We had 2 at one time.
Okay. Okay, but they were leveraged during a high call volume season. Okay.
Yes.
No, that's good. That's good. Okay, any other comments?
No.
Okay. I gotta make sure I'm in the right spot.
I have one more question. On the year-to-date, I know we're only halfway through the year, but in years past, on the year-to-date, how much of what we're budgeting, how much are we having to return? And then how much is left over? How accurate are we budgeting?
Yeah, so our largest number that we return is typically in employee expenses, and that has a lot to do with, spot vacancies and, turnover, as well as we had, which we're trying to, narrow more as we go forward in the 2023 budget, but on our previous, pay scales and things, we were having to budget a very large salary reserve, because we had no idea what kind of staff we would actually get to apply. So the problem with licensing is that we could get anywhere from somebody who has absolutely no experience, all the way up to somebody who's already got their state licensing and several years' experience in another district. And, so in past years, we were having to budget extra money, but we were getting a lot of new staff. We weren't getting a lot of people coming from other districts that wanted to work here that had those, higher level licenses. So there was a lot of money left over in the salary reserves for those hirings that we get sent back.
Is it fair to say with new administration coming in that we hope to be able to, you know, if there's a new pay structure and we kind of work on those sliding scale and whatnot, is the hope that we'll be able to more accurately pinpoint
Yes.
some of those
What-
positions, rather than
what-
budgeting the spectrum?
Well, and what the board, y'all created that committee to look at the salary
Yes.
with Ross, and as of right now, what we're doing, it's more, there's not so much subjectivity in it, so I think you can budget more closely to what is actually gonna be approved for that next year, or whether it's a COLA or a merit raise.
You're still gonna budget based on what the anticipation is, doesn't mean you have to fill that spot.
Right.
And that's been going on out there, part of the district, where
Right.
you're having to do it based on what you think, not,
Right.
but you don't have to pull the trigger until you actually. have
Right,
to do it.
but right now the pay scale is so complex that at least we hope, I would think, that we're gonna be able to better pinpoint
I
the
think we can.
scale.
Yeah, I
Right.
think we can.
And we have to budget for retirees, like people are gonna retire.
Right, yeah.
Which, if they're eligible, so they may be eligible, but we budget for it and they don't retire, but
Right.
we still have to account for it.
Right.
And from the financial side, that is absolutely our goal, and where we're moving to have a more focused and pinpointed budget, at least as close as we possibly can. So,
And to clarify too, the reserve, or whatever's left over at the end of the year, that is returned to the entities.
yes,
I
absolutely.
just wanted to make that clear.
And we returned how much this past year? Quite a bit.
Well, currently, there's a fund balance of around $430,000 that will be returned once the audit is completed, assuming, I mean, those are estimated numbers, but yes.
Yeah, so the idea is that just because we have it, we don't have to spend it.
Right.
Right.
Just because we have it, we don't spend it.
Well, and it doesn't go into a reserve fund
Correct.
for the following year, that just turns into a slush fund, like,
Right.
the money goes back to the entities, they can consider that in their budget for the future, so it kind of offsets it. You hope ideally that it offsets their next year's budget also, if they get that return from the CAT.
Okay. All right, we will close the budget hearing at 6:22. We will now transition to the Board of Directors meeting. All right, we'll call this meeting to order at 6:23. This meeting is being held in open session in accordance with chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. And business as conducted by the board will be done so in open session. We've already done the prayer and pledges, so we will go ahead and transition to agenda item number 1, which is citizens communication. I know that there was a few that wanted to speak in both, and based on the discussion just now, you may want to speak again, and that will be fine as well. I just may not have your name down, so you may have to flag. Let me get started with those that signed up. Okay. Mr. Ferris, you're first up.
Okay, real quick, there's been a number of issues that I would like for you, Mr. Tyler, to address with the people here at the appraisal district. Seems to be some confusion or recommendations made about whether or not evidence package for a property owner who's making a protest should get this prior to his informal meeting. There has been a number of circumstances that I have had people approach and tell me about where they were approached or had approached the desk out here and were told that they would not get their evidence package until such time as they were set for the formal meeting, and it would be denied for the informal meeting. So I'm gonna call your attention to the law. Texas Property Tax Code 46.461. At least 14 days before a hearing. It does not specify a hearing, but a hearing on a protest. That's about as precise as you can actually get. So whether it's informal or formal, that means that that particular property owner is entitled to that evidence package. That has been denied to them. They are told that they will get their evidence package only prior to a formal meeting. We've had several circumstances where one of your employees here, if you'd like the name, I'll be more than happy to give it to you, but the employee lady informed them that that package would be handed to them as they were being walked down to their formal meeting. Now that gives you absolutely no time to do any research on the actual properties that are used by the county as evidence. And what's more, Texas law says you gotta give these people 14 days if they're a property owner to do that research. And if you wanna get irritated at me, I'm the one that wrote up the 30-day extension thing using the Texas law, which a lot of your folks are now applying, is that every time that they come in and they haven't got enough time to do their research properly, without any excuse required, they're allowed to go get a 30-day extension. So that keeps putting you farther and farther and farther back against that July 20th or 25th certification date, whatever you want to call it. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that your board addresses this issue and that it puts it before the actual appraisal district employees as to why they are not doing what they have done in years past, which is providing that package to those tax protesters prior to both informal and formal meetings. It's something that is very, very important because it allows them to make a decision as to what they're going to do, how they're going to present the arguments when they come in here, and how they're going to conduct themselves, even whether or not they're gonna finish out with the protest. And the fact that this is being denied is quite atrocious because the law says 46.461 is that they're entitled to that. And I will finish my talk with that, and I will give you that because you didn't take any notes. That way you can actually reference it for yourself. Thank you.
Mr. Flores?
All right, well, he stole some of my thunder. As my wife and I are the founders of the Comal Property Guardians, and we get lots and lots of feedback from property owners that are in the protest process. That was one of my points. I actually printed it up for you guys too, what the statute says regarding the 14-day in advance evidence packet. But I want to speak to another issue and talk to people out here. They're just echoing this, and that is that this board demand that the interim chief appraiser and his staff stop pressuring property owners to make on-the-spot decisions about over-the-phone offers being made by appraisers. We have to think these things through. We can't just say, take it now, otherwise it's off the table when you have your hearing. That sounds like coercion and intimidation, and I've heard it, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. And I'm sure there's people in this room that have experienced something like that. That needs to stop. The other thing that people are being told is reducing their fair market value. Someone with a homestead, for example, is actually gonna cause their taxes to go up higher. Anyone in here heard that too? What kind of math are they doing? What formula are they following? How in the world, especially if they have a homestead, reducing their fair market value gonna increase their property tax? That's ridiculous. I'm just telling you what is being communicated out there to property owners. Look into it. And we really demand that you cause the chief appraiser and his staff to stop doing it. I also want to address next the grossly inconsistent property valuations by the chief appraiser. I've included a spreadsheet, I'll be handing it to you afterwards, of some sample properties I've researched which demonstrate these gross inconsistencies. Just as some examples, the CAD fair market value, land values of some properties in underdeveloped areas of the county. What I mean by that is dirt roads, no views, no golf courses, no utilities, rose almost 700% from 2021 to 2022, and I have examples in here. While other well-developed communities saw marginal increases from 7% to 15%. And the land values in those communities actually appraised at a much lower value per square foot than the underdeveloped properties. How do you explain that? I wish I had pictures, I'd show you. I think you would laugh. So there's countless of examples. I have provided 28 properties to illustrate these discrepancies. There's no excuse for this. This guy needs to go back to the drawing board, and if necessary, and if allowed under the law, have a do-over, because this is bad. In the meantime, 27,000 property owners are standing their ground and will not lay down for this. If the chief appraiser can't certify the rules on July 25th due to more than 5% of protest values remaining unresolved, so be it. So be it. My last point.
3 minutes. Go ahead and finish with this 3 minutes.
Short paragraph. Thank you, appreciate it. What this board should have done regarding the out of confidence status was to immediately relentlessly protest the comptroller's hyperinflated values. I did some more digging, Mr. Couch, okay?
And we did.
I'm sorry?
We did. That's what we did.
The immediate past chief appraiser valued residential property in Comal School District in 2021 at over $2 billion higher than 2020 values. Comptroller said, that's not good enough. I say, it's better be good enough. You need to make it good enough. They expected a $3.2 billion increase in values. I read the PBS correctly, and I'm pretty sure I did. That's a 26% increase over 2021. So this board and the chief appraiser should have immediately pushed back, immediately, before this year's appraisals went out. Seems like that was a knee-jerk reaction. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you wanna share offline, that's not what happened, but that sure is what it seems like.
Just to give you a day, go ahead.
Alright, because what it seems like is Glenn Hager said jump and this board said how high. That's what it seems like, okay? And so now we're having to go back. I'm glad we're challenging it, thank you for sharing that. But what's gonna happen to this year's appraisals as a result of being out of confidence, which we should not have been? And I think you agree with that, which is why you're protesting.
Yes.
What do we do with this year's appraisals now? We're stuck with it.
Can you give them the background information on this?
So, yeah, so the actual property valuation study is given to us on January the 31st. We actually met on February the 9th to challenge it. We didn't know prior to that we would be out of confidence.
Okay.
But we called a special meeting to specifically review the findings. Once we received it, we immediately challenged it. That's not challenged from the district, it has to be challenged from the school districts.
I understand.
The values that you're talking about don't really affect the property owners. What it does is it affects the sampling that the comptroller's office is using to hold us standard or accountable to that. Because we came in at where we thought they should be, and they said they need to be higher. We went, no, we didn't, and so they have challenged it. So they're doing exactly what you're saying, and we took immediate action upon getting that notice to be able to do that. Because I agree with you, we need to be within the confidence levels, and we need to challenge if we think they're out of line, and we felt that way. But that comes from the school district standpoint with our support, which is what you got.
Well, I appreciate you speaking to that, but it still doesn't explain, nor does it give anybody in this room and the 100,000 property owners out there any peace of mind, because we have our 2022 appraisals. What are we gonna do about those? If that was a knee-jerk reaction or an overcorrection, Mr. Tyler, you and I had a little discussion about the out of confidence thing. I wanna make that clear. Is this an overcorrection? How can we know that for sure? If this is an overcorrection, or it's just this, let's do it this way because it's safe, because we can't be out of confidence again. How can we trust these values, especially with the examples I'm gonna share with you guys? And believe me, there's a lot more. I'm one guy. I have a full-time job. Do the best I can. What do we do about that? I didn't think we'd answer, and that's okay. It's a big question mark. I'm gonna leave this with you. It's got a spreadsheet with the 28 properties. I had a lot more, but I had to get something together, something that's tangible, that makes sense. I like you. Appreciate it, thanks.
Okay, Ms. Lane?
A lot of us property owners are tired of hearing about comps that are driving up our property values. Contracts are an essential and important part of our daily lives. If we did not agree to pay for our property at a hyperinflated cost, then we should not be taxed at a hyperinflated cost just because someone else, an investor, an out-of-towner, a hedge fund company did. This madness must be addressed and stopped. Incidentally, how is the CAT qualifying comps? How does an investor who pays a hyperinflated cost in cash compare to an individual local property owner who has a homestead? Ms. Pappas, this is directed at you, Mrs. Pappas. I find it disingenuous of you to sit up here in judgment of property taxes when you are a former CISD board member turned CAD board member, and your property taxes have been frozen for 18 years. Looked you up on the CAD property tax on the online. Is that not true? since 2004.
That is, I have no idea.
So it's like you're not experiencing what everyday people are experiencing. Thank you very much.
They should not be
Okay.
addressing me individually.
Mr. Rutherford.
Well, that's me, I'm
Oh,
girl.
I'm sorry.
It's Chris.
I'm sorry. I got
I'm-
out of order.
I'm just an ordinary person, I don't have a
I'm
lot of the
sorry.
knowledge that a lot of these other people do. But I was one that was told I could not have an evidence package. When I insisted, we hung up, they emailed me an evidence package within 2 minutes, I swear this happened. So I'm just confused. I have 2 properties, I have 20 Sun Valley, I have a small motorcycle shop on half an acre, and then I have my residence on the other 2.5 acres. So I have issues, and maybe it's just not understanding the appraisal process and the legalities and how it all works, but, I take issue with the comps not being really being comps. My comps for my business, we're residential comps that are 30 minutes north of me in Canyon Lake area, and they were all residential, none had the building on it, it was just basically land comps, and I was told in my informal meeting, too bad, the comps are the comps. So I also take an issue with showing up for an informal meeting and getting an offer to reduce my value right off the bat. Just for showing up and saying that I'm not happy and I think it's overvalued. How is the amount of that discount decided? Should I have taken it immediately on the spot? I didn't know. And why isn't it offered to everybody? Only people who show up and say and protest. What about my neighbor who doesn't? Did they get a discount? No, because they didn't show up, but I could. I didn't take it, I just chose to go to the formal meeting. I also take issue with kind of funny math on my residential property. I was under the impression that the homestead exemption is $25,000 and it was voted to $40,000. My exemptions were $101,000 to make up for an increased market value so that the bottom line looks like it only went up 10%. I think that's the math, if I'm looking at it correctly, that's what happened with me. I have not even gotten anything to have a hearing on that property yet. So I think something's wrong there. I also take issue with my metal building on my motorcycle shop building. I bought it in 2020, it went up in 2021 for $100,000. I have the contracts on it. And it was valued at $200,000 because it's newer, I was told, it increased that $100,000 over the year. My neighbor's building went down $25,000 because it was older, it said that one can depreciate, but mine goes up because it's newer. So what are the guidelines for determining that? Whose goes up and whose goes down? Is it by year? I can't find it anywhere. And I'd also like to say that some buildings out there on Sun Valley are not on anybody's radar at all, and they've never been reported. One is Winning Waters, who has indoor swimming pools at 7 Sun Valley. I'm sorry if I'm gonna rat out my neighbors. At 16 Sun Valley, his house is not on him. And it hasn't been for years. I reported it last year, it's still not on there, and he laughs. Oh, I'm gonna be quiet because mine's not on there. But mine is because I bought my property 2 years ago, so obviously somebody knows about it. So I take issue with ordinary people like me who have sifted through hundreds of pages of tax codes the other night, reading and scrolling through it, trying to find answers. What is a comp? Where's depreciation? How do I know if my mobile home, because I bought it with my land and I own the land, can it be a mobile home or not? I can't find good answers without paying lawyers, and I can't afford to pay lawyers. So where do we get these answers? And I just feel for those who are uneducated and overwhelmed and don't even protest. I talk to people that we don't protest, we don't even know what to do with that. We just have to pay it or sell. And that's what I'm told by a lot of people. So I'm just here to be that voice because I am experiencing what a lot of people are experiencing. We need answers, we need it fair. We just want it fair. Tell us how it works and make it fair to everybody across the board.
Can I encourage you to reach out to Larry? He can help with a lot of your questions.
Larry.
Larry is our tax liaison officer.
Uh-huh.
He's right there in the lobby. But he can help guide a lot of those.
Okay, but that's me. And there's so many people that don't even know what to do. So that's kind of why I'm voicing
It's difficult
this.
for us to communicate all this the same. We're not.
But if you're gonna charge me for it, if you're gonna give discounts, if you're going to
Understood.
not depreciate one and depreciate the other, everybody should know, what are the rules?
Yeah.
And what can we fight for and what can we not fight for? Do I go in there and say, oh these comps are not commercial, so you can't use them? So now what do we do in the formal meeting? Do they say, oh, no, they can be because we can't find any others so they can be used? I mean, what is the rule? So then I stand there looking stupid, okay, I guess you can. What do I say?
That's what Larry helps you with. That's absolutely what Larry is here for, what he's employed by the district to do.
But nobody knows that who Larry is.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. It's posted all over the website.
Again,
It's
it's-
online. If you go to our website,
See?
look up the.
People don't know.
the tax liaison officer, he's on there.
I don't like saying HERMIT.
HERMANCE. Kind of put me on the spot there for a minute, but.
As the tax assessor, I find myself in a position oftentimes of feeling like there's a lot of education involved, and it sometimes feels like I'm pointing fingers and redirecting. I don't mean that when I say this, but again, what a lot of what the district does, and not all of it, it's all set forth by the tax code, which is approved and written by your legislature and the comptroller. It is, and so it's not passing the blame. We're here, we're your local.
I understand
We're your
that.
local representatives to make sure that our county and our community is educated on these topics. But it does start at a higher level, and so I just encourage you to voice your opinion with your state rep.
I
your
agree,
state
but they
senator.
still are overvalued, you know, when land triples,
Yeah.
and then the comps triple also, what do you have?
I'm not,
to go
again,
for?
I'm not passing all
So,
blame.
and then the property's not even reported, what do the appraisers do? These high-paid appraisers, those whole houses and buildings and swimming pools that aren't even being collected for, when I'm paying for mine, so,
Sure. Yeah,
there you
if
go.
they're there, they
If
need
you
to
got
know.
anything out of it, maybe it's that, so,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Deborah Hindman?
Yes, sir.
Heidman, I'm sorry.
Either way, it's all good.
I apologize.
I can. So I had an interesting experience almost throwing my car off the road the other day. I got a call from my mom. She's 78. She's a really young 78. She lives in a retirement community in San Marcos, but she's moving because they're too old and she doesn't want to be part of it. She bought a house down here. She sold her business in Colorado and she bought an RV park down here. And she calls me and she says, well, I just had my informal over the phone. And I'm like, Mom, you don't even have your evidence package yet. How can you have your informal over the phone? And she's like, well, they said they couldn't do anything for me, so I have to go to the formal. And then I'm like, okay, so I go home and I write a letter and I come down here and they said, I'm not entitled to a 30-day extension. And they said they would try, and they were very, very nice. All these people are so nice, so don't take it that they are very, very nice. They really are. But they said we weren't entitled to a 30-day extension. They've got too many people and they can't guarantee us a 30-day extension, number one. And number two, they said they would do the best they could on the 14 days, but again, they weren't really required to get it to us for the hearing. And this is for my 78-year-old mother. You know, I can deal with the stress. And I got my blood pressure under control. I lost 30 pounds. But my mom's blood pressure's a little high right now, and I'm a little worried about her. And I think this is elder abuse, you know, to do this to her and call her, and she's, you know, that old by herself dealing with these challenges. And I would really, really think that everybody needs to be treated fairly. And the law does say there's a 14-day, the law does say there's a 30-day, the law says you're supposed to send the evidence package. I got my evidence package last year and the year before fine, and I literally had to drive down here and give them a formal letter and say, this is the code, and I need it, and they got it for me right away. Fabulously nice people, but I think they're trying to get people to give up and not fight. And we're not gonna give up and not fight. And my mom is tough and she will fight, you know. She's the Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey. But it's just hard on her. And I wish they would know what they're doing to some of these older people. And there's probably a lot of older people who don't have families supporting them and they're going through this. And it's wrong. Thank you very much for listening to me.
I believe that is all that I have on my list. Does anybody else wish? Oh, Alex Ruiz? That one came in later.
Diane's coming.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I did skip her. That was my fault.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think I'm
your time.
That's fine. Can I ask, is the sound better out there now? Okay. It's better, but not.
It's better, but it's still, I mean, there's one woman sitting right up at the computer,
Okay.
so she can understand what's being said, but yeah, it's much better.
Okay.
Before it was very verbal.
Okay.
I appreciate your time. I'm not a tax person. I don't understand the way you approach setting the tax rates, but I just think it's horrendous that y'all are allowed to set these tax codes and expel residents who have been in their homes for years. Some have been willed down to them. And because of these codes and these amounts of monies that y'all are requiring, I mean, who sets the standards? You know, the state, yeah, well, the state sets the standard, but I mean, seriously, come on, we're real people. We're just striving to survive. Again, we purchased our home in 2016. My father-in-law passed away, and we took our mother-in-law in, so we have a mother-in-law apartment within our home. It is unconscionable, really. The houses that are going in our neighborhood, it's like, seriously, we live in Johnson Ranch, and the prices are, it's awful. You know, we're trying to do the right thing and stand by family and take care of family. I stay at home because I take care of mom, who's gonna be 88 next month. My husband is the sole provider, and I'm mad. I'm mad, not just for myself, but I'm mad because I see people being put out of their homes because they can't afford their taxes. I'm not against paying tax, but don't increase it so much to the point that we can't do it. I mean, that's communistic. There's no other way to put it. It really is. The tax code, you know, getting your information 14 days before that, I mean, I just talked to Larry and he handed me the same thing, but it doesn't say formal or informal. And bottom line, it just doesn't, it's not clear. And I don't think that y'all should be breaking your own laws. I think y'all should be held accountable to do the right thing in the eyes of God, because we all do. We're all gonna meet him one day. Whether anybody thinks he is real or not, he's there, he's living. And I just don't think that these fees are realistic. I think they're unfair and they're unreasonable. There's a day coming. You know, are you gonna be able to stand before the Maker and give an account and say, and here, well done? Or is it gonna be away from me, for I never knew you? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Unless I missed you, and again, I apologize. I'm sorry, I think Larry said there was two more. You're up.
I'm up, okay. First off, let me start with what I'm gonna put out is hopefully plant a seed for how we can resolve some things in the future. It's not gonna help now, but hopefully it plants a seed for everyone. Hi y'all, my name is Alejandro Ruiz. And I'm not a public speaker, as you can tell. I am a retired disabled Navy Seabee who proudly served my country for over 30 years. I would have served longer, but when my contract was up during the Abomination administration, I chose to retire than continue serving in an administration that didn't love my country nowhere near as much as I, and was a commencement of the destruction of our nation, which is continuing with the former vice president, which is currently occupying the White House. I am also a retired public servant who maintained the 911 communication center for the Los Angeles City Fire Department. We had been wanting to come here for many years, once I would be able to retire. Thankfully for us, the Chinese virus created the opportunity to retire earlier than planned, and we did not hesitate in returning back to the United States, and more specifically, the great state of Texas. Yes, you heard right. I am one of the many refugees that have been able to escape California. When we bought our home in November of 2020, we paid what was based on comps then, the right price, not falsely inflated prices as many others have, which I think has added to the current situation, which those doing these current appraisals are greedily taken advantage of. I share where we're from, not because I want everyone to know, far from it. If I could have my way, I would never disclose it and hope people just thought we were native Texans. I would be honored if that's what was thought of me. I share it because it's relevant here. It's relevant because what is going on here now is what had been going on there also for many years. And fortunately, the voters were finally able to pass Prop 13. For those not familiar with Prop 13, it capped the real estate tax at 1% of the sale price at time of purchase, and could only be raised for inflation a maximum of 2%, plus also any voter-approved increases. Voters were fed up with the abuse that we are now seeing take place here. I understand you don't set the tax rate. A different entity is gouging us there. However, if you could consider incorporating part of Prop 13 in that a property only gets reappraised upon sale or new construction.
Yes.
In other words, similar as car registration. Right now, you register your car, you pay what the sale price was, and then you just pay whatever amount each year. If they were doing that the way they're doing the real estate, I'm almost done.
You're good, I'm just letting you know.
If they were to do that with the car registrations, with the way things are going now, the prices of cars, used cars are going through the roof, we'd be paying a ridiculous amount for our car registration. Just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Larry's, I thought there were two more. Larry, if there's another one, would you mind helping?
He's coming.
Okay.
Sorry, I've never been in front of people for this, and I'm 58 years old, and I've lived in Texas majority of my life. I mean, I did live in Spokane, Washington, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, because they don't have income tax. And my property taxes here are outrageous compared to those other two states. But this year I am protesting because this is just outrageous. I don't know what's going on, and maybe someone can help me understand. But everyone keeps pointing fingers that it's this person doing it, it's that person doing it. I just wanna know who's stinking doing it, because I'm reading, this is my 2022 notice, right? Appraisal value. It says, the Texas legislator does not set the amount of your local taxes. Your property tax burden is decided by your local elected officials. Who in the heck are those? Which ones are they? Can you tell me, somebody?
The governing bodies.
Yeah, it
So
depends
who-
on where you live.
So, okay, why, I live in Comal.
Correct, but there's other entities. that
So,
do it.
okay, but the big one that comes out that's deciding these values for me, who's that person? So who am I supposed to be going to say, y'all are crazy?
Correct, so it depends on where you live geographically.
Okay,
So it can be the school districts, it can be the cities, it can be the
Okay.
county, it can be local utility districts, there's a lot of
Yeah,
parameters.
but their amounts of going up aren't very big compared to the Comal County. So that's why I'm here, because
Yeah.
Comal County is my big chunk.
Correct, and so
And then
all we're
my
doing is.
school district's the next big chunk.
Correct, they're identifying the value of the property, market value of the property, and then the entities actually set the rates on that.
Yeah, but, I mean, come on, I mean, this this isn't California, and I mean, all of a sudden we're getting jabbed with all this stuff, and it's not fair and equitable. I don't know who the lady was that was speaking. It was like, I shouldn't have to be coming here and protest. Y'all should just do your stinking job and get the right value for us, so then I can go back to my normal life where I would just pay my taxes. And then, you know, and just because he protests and I didn't, he shouldn't get a better deal and I get screwed over. That's not right. I mean, it's, you know, everybody should be doing the same thing, and just because someone stepped up and spoke, I don't speak up. I mean, I stay in the corner and I don't really care on the stuff, and I just pay my bills and stuff like that. But this year I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to speak up because this is ridiculous. According to the numbers, like 27,000 people are protesting. Y'all had to do that budget, and on that budget, we should be seeing budgeted amount versus actual amount, and then your intended spend, and see a percentage, and that should be on the spreadsheet originally when we come on.
That's in the meeting agenda for tonight.
Yeah,
So
okay,
you can
so,
get it.
so on that part, cause I mean, when I was going through it, it was like, you know, we don't really know what those items are, and there was some nice gentleman that was saying some other values on there, and all of a sudden, you know, it's like, well, ask questions now. Well, if I don't know what what is this kind of fee, when it had the attorney's fee, and then they said, oh, this is, you know, because this and this is difference, and it was like, there's deltas on stuff. So sorry, I know, I'm 3 minutes. And so, but I was just, can you just be fair and equitable across the board? And I mean, these people, this is not right, and especially for the elderly. Well, yeah, you're gonna get an extra bonus because of the vote that happened, but if the thing's gone skyrocketed, you've actually went still in the red, and it doesn't matter, and these people can't afford it. And that's just not fair. It's just not fair, and it should be equitable across the board. And if everyone's gonna pay it, either that or come up with a flat tax and just do, you know, a flat tax, because it's kind of like, this is crazy, but we need to come up with something better, because this is, I mean, we're wasting your time right now doing this, wasting my time doing this, and this is, you know, if you just did something equitable, people wouldn't have to be protesting, and the numbers are showing it. It's 27,000, that's ridiculous. And if y'all's budget went up to 158, I think that's the new number for the protest, it's gonna be higher next year. So, and that's ridiculous. So let's do something fair and equitable so we don't have to be wasting each other's time. But thank you so much for your service and for hearing me, and have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah, she didn't sign up, so I don't have her name.
Do you need her name?
Get her name.
If she would like, it's not a requirement.
Yeah, for who?
Could I get
Oh,
you to
Mrs.
sign?
Smith, yeah,
Could you
sure.
mind signing in?
Sure.
That helps us be able to follow up.
Sure.
Mr. Tyler, can you just, she asked a really good question, which is hard to understand. Who exactly is responsible for setting the value, and then who is actually responsible for setting the tax rate?
Can I wait until we get into the agenda to answer those? Cause there's some discussionary points, and I just wanna make sure we stay on topic.
Okay.
And there's a few that I wrote down that we're also gonna address in the general meeting, and it'll make more sense if we address it at that time. Is that okay?
Thank you so much.
All right, we will do one last call for citizen communications. Okay, we will move to agenda item number 2, which this time, I think I'm in the correct spot, which is board communication. Any communication the board would like to have. There were, and I struggle with, I'm not sure exactly where exactly to talk about this, but there was quite a few questions about evidence packages. I don't know if that is in the ARB side, or if that, where that comes together and where those come from, but we need to address it at one of those discussion topic time periods, if possible. And do you want to do yours now?
As long as it's within the order that.
I think you ought to put it within the chief
Yeah,
appraiser's
so we'll put it in there.
You might speak specifically to what agenda item number 2 is. I think there's confusion on what that specific item
I'm
is.
sorry, agenda item number 2 is something that we've recently added, which is tax code section 615. Board members are strictly prohibited from directly communicating anything of value related directly to the chief appraiser. And we have to do everything in open communication in this room. Whenever it looks like we're on different pages, sometimes we probably are, because we don't communicate outside of this open platform here, and same with the board. The board is not allowed to make any kind of discussionary topics by civil penalty on some of these are criminal penalties. So we can't comment on taxing units, we can't comment, all that our roles and responsibilities are the day-to-day operations of the county.
On specific units.
Right.
If you have a question about your property, you come to me, I can't call the chief appraiser and have a specific conversation with regards to yours outside of open session.
Correct. He can transmit that, but without context, and then that follow-up will come from some other place. So if you reach out to one of us, all that we're going to do, and you'll probably notice I passed a lot of that back to Larry, because Larry's such a huge asset on helping navigate taxpayers through that. Again, it is a frustration. I know there's a lot of confusion in the tax laws, especially around exemptions. That was mentioned a couple times related to elderly. I don't mean that bad, but over 65 exemptions, you know, a lot of those, there's a lot of protections on some of these homesteads. So really would strongly suggest that you reach out to the TLO. That's what he's here for, is to provide that asset. He's done a great job. I can't thank Larry enough for helping with that. Anything else? Any other topics? Okay, all right, we will move to agenda item number 3, which is presentation of the service awards. Mr. Booker?
So the service award is for Belia Quinnish. She was not able to attend today. She's been with the district for 5 years. We have a pin for her, and we'll make sure we get that to her on
Thank you.
behalf.
And who is it, Conjecture?
Belia Quinnish.
I would like to point out that whenever we're sent the agenda packets for review, I did look through the TLO's report, which includes the citizen communication comments cards that you all mentioned that when you interacted with the district, we will ask you to fill out a comment card just to see how we're doing. Her name specifically showed up multiple times on those cards with just phenomenal ratings, and so I was hoping she would be here, that we could mention that to her, but please pass that along to the board, our appreciation.
Absolutely.
All right, next item up is approval of the minutes from the May 10th meeting, which was our last regularly scheduled meeting,
So y'all should have a copy of the minutes within your binders.
They were sent out afterwards.
That's right.
Pam said there was one correction in the very back of the minutes.
Yeah, we didn't stay till 1, we stayed till 11. 2 hours earlier.
And we reviewed the minutes, and we recommend the board approve the minutes as presented.
I'll make the motion, we approve the minutes as corrected.
I'll second. Motion by Eric, second by Brett. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries. All right, next up is agenda item number 5, which is the interim chief appraiser reports. Mr. Booker?
We need to talk about evidence during the report.
There's, yes, evidence, hold on, there's another one. There were some questions about, fair market value, or market value. And we may also discuss, the reappraisal plan and how that works, because that addresses one of these questions about whenever research is done and how the county approves that plan.
So the fair market value, Mr. Sweeney has an opinion, maybe we can leave that.
Okay.
Is
Fair enough.
And we can go over the other 2. So in regards to evidence, so the district is not required to offer an informal, first off. We're only required to offer an informal if it's requested by the property owner. Now, we give an informal to every property owner that files a protest, so we are extending that courtesy. What the law says, and step in, Mr. Sweeney, if I misspeak. The law states that we're required to send the evidence 14 days prior to your formal hearing. The code does not refer to as an informal hearing, it refers to it as a conference or a meeting. Those aren't open hearings over there, so there's no requirement to send it to the property owners. We do send the evidence to everyone, but it was stated several times, there's 27,000 protests and 37 employees, so we're doing the best we can to produce that as quickly as possible and get it to those property owners. But we're not withholding evidence from them. Another scenario of that is we might have some evidence for a property owner at their informal, but get more evidence before their formal hearing is scheduled, which could benefit the property owner or could benefit the district. So we might change that evidence prior to scheduling them for a hearing.
The tax code that talks about the informal conference, can you confirm that that's 41.445?
And can you read it?
I don't have it.
That's new for this month's session.
I think it's 41.445, which refers to the informal conference. So I'm wondering if it's more of a lingo issue with the district and calling it an informal hearing when the code references it as the informal conference.
What about 46.461?
So we don't, even on the notices that go out for an informal conference, it says meeting, and on the appraisal notice that's sent to those property owners, it says appraisal conference, or an informal conference on there, not a hearing. Or a meeting.
462 predates that as well, so it's referring only to the bigger people.
Can you repeat that code, please?
It's,
I thought you said 41.
I'm sorry, I can say it. The one I'm referencing is 41.445.
The conference one.
The one about the informal conference.
Mr. Sweeney, did you just mention that revised this session?
This past session.
Okay, so the predated one was, well, it actually doesn't matter. It's not
462.
applicable. Okay, there was a 30-day discussion also about inability to maybe honor the 30-day extension.
So if we do not provide it within 14 days of the hearing, that hearing will be postponed, so that they will have time to review their evidence.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, can you just clarify? You said that they can provide more comps after the informal hearing and before the formal hearing?
It's not
The county
an
can?
informal hearing, it's an informal
Okay,
meeting or conference, and the district can use different evidence before you get to your formal hearing.
And what is that under? Like, what rule is that under?
Well, that's why you have the 14-day requirement, because if we do change evidence before we schedule you, we have to give you that 14 days ahead of time so you can review that.
So if you do change, you will send out new evidence?
Absolutely, 14 days ahead of time, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, does that mean that if you find new evidence 7 days before my scheduled hearing, that I'm gonna get a new 14 days?
No, sir. Well,
That's what I thought I heard. I think that's what.
Once we schedule you and send you your evidence, that's what we're gonna use at the hearing.
But, so that means you won't be able to introduce any new evidence that you may have come across once you've sent that out?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fine.
Absolutely.
Just want to be clear. All right.
We're bound to what we send you in the mail to present as evidence.
All right, thank you.
Can you go, actually, I'm gonna wait on that one. Just to tee you up, talk about, the options for the, protest, over the phone, in person. The different options. Don't have to do it now, just.
Okay.
Somebody mentioned that they had to come in, and that's not.
Or I can go over that.
Okay, yeah, that's fine, go ahead.
So, informally, we're trying to do them through email, over the phone, we have Zoom rooms for the appraisers as well. Formally, there's 4 ways a property owner can appear. They can appear in person, they can appear by notarized affidavit, they can appear by a telephone conference call that also requires a notarized affidavit, or they can appear through a Zoom conference call that also requires an affidavit. So there's 4 avenues. Or the property owner can give a written statement authorizing somebody to come on their behalf. Or they can use a tax rep or an attorney or anything like that. So there's
several ways for property owners to. Thank you. And then the reappraisal process. Sure, so we have, 3 reappraisal areas, it's broken up into thirds. A lot of that's kind of how our pictometry is set, so we make sure we get all those improvements. That doesn't make sure we ignore the other 2/3 of the county. We look at every neighborhood, we look at sales, we analyze it, and we make adjustments accordingly. So we do put a little bit more focus on every appraisal area, but we still look at everything, so.
You know, one of the things that, I think, some of our speakers had talked about was the influx of people from out of state coming in, increase their values. There was an interesting, report put out by the chamber, it was done in economic development, that showed that the number 1 was coming from Bear County, number 2 was coming from Travis County within the last 2 years. And way down the list was California. So we're seeing a large influx from Bear County, Travis County into the western and northern parts of the county within the last year or 2.
Sure.
That have really had an influence on those values, and they have increased. I agree, I'm in that industry, and they have substantially increased. And you know, I think part of it is that people are fleeing the Bear County metro area for a lower tax rate because Bear County has similar valuations that we do. I understand that. And the same with Travis County. I mean, if you're in a mud district in Travis County, you're paying 3.5%. So we are feeling that pain of increased values but it's coming from those 2 markets. It's not coming from California and others. I think Dallas was 3 and Houston was 4. It's great if you want to get on and look at the Economic Development Foundation's report, because it will show you who's driving up our values here. But they are paying it, they are going up. I don't disagree with you. I think we're all feeling the same pain on that.
You mentioned wanting to make a comment earlier.
We addressed it.
Okay.
With the evidence packet.
Got it. Okay, and then the last one, before we go, to the detail piece of this is, can you give an overview of the taxing structure, where we come into play to address the different pieces of how the ultimate tax payment gets there? Are you talking about how the value is like broken out on? So, yeah, where does market value start? Sure. And I know that we're gonna have that opinion here in just a second as an agenda item, but development of the market value, you take off exemptions, and then that's how the taxing units actually apply. So it's all gonna start at your market value. That's what we're gonna say your property is worth. After that, you have appraised value, which is less any ag or timber valuation. After that, you have assessed value. So if you're in a school district or the city of New Braunfels, they offer an additional 20% off of your value. So if your appraised value is at $500,000, but your assessed value is at $300,000, you're gonna come up with a dollar amount paid based off of that 20%. Well, if you come in and protest and you lower your value from $500,000 to $400,000, well, 20% is less. 20% of $400,000 is less than 20% of $500,000. So until you get below your assessed value, technically, within those entities, you're raising your tax liability. Is that clear? Maybe Mr. Sweeney can.
Yeah, we've had a lot of cases of those come in the tax office, and it's very drawn out, and it takes a long time to get it on pen and paper to visualize, and I'm a visual person, so I did the same thing. It can happen. You can protest your value and your tax dollar amount, your tax obligation go up. And we've actually had someone from Waterloo County CAD under Comal ISD go back and say, hey, I'm gonna pull my protest, I'm gonna undo it, and I think they let her do it, but it absolutely can happen.
Can we talk? Okay. Can you give that example one more time? Sorry, just. No, absolutely. So, do you need all the values again, or just between the 20% of your assessed and? Just how it works, where you can actually come out. So if we're saying your appraised value is $500,000, but your assessed value is $300,000 because we raised you more than 10% from the year before, so you have 2 different numbers there. If you come in and protest that $500,000 and get it lowered to $400,000, once the exemptions are applied, that 20% 20% of $500,000 is more than 20% of $400,000. So it's gonna subtract that from your assessed value. So in hindsight, it raises your tax liability.
So you're gonna get an $80,000 reduction instead of $100,000 on that $300,000 for taxable purposes.
Right.
It
So,
sounds a
yes.
little crooked, but I mean, that's again goes back to the code, and that's.
It does.
That's just how it goes.
Does that exemption apply when it's not your homestead, when it's a property that you're renting out to somebody?
No, ma'am, because if it's a rental property and not your homestead, it wouldn't qualify for that exemption.
Okay, so, all right.
So I just gotta say something. This is where a lot of the confusion lies with a lot of people that I talk to. You get your appraisal letter and it's got the blue and white lines, and on there it looks great. Fair market value, and then the assigned appraised value, and then the assessed value is there, then the taxable value is also there. So that works great. But when you go online on the portal says that the same number that is called appraised value, which is correct according to statute, the same number that says appraised value on your letter is called assessed value on the portal.
We have, that'll be something that Mr. Sweeney addresses. There's a separate agenda item for that.
Okay. Well, so it's hard for me to swallow what he just said, because he's talking like the portal instead of talking like the letter. And it matters. 4 separate terms with their own definitions. Okay.
Okay.
So first item for you is update on the 2022 protests.
Sure. Mr. Cox is gonna give his numbers in relation to what's gone to the ARB and how those numbers break out. As of right now, all the timely protests have been loaded at the district, and as of this morning, we have 29,545 protests, which is up from 17,500 from last year.
If someone has not heard back, if someone filed before the deadline and they haven't scheduled yet, that's not abnormal.
No, ma'am.
Right, okay.
No, ma'am. We're still scheduling protests and.
I assume so, but just make it
Right.
clear, yeah. So if you did file timely, you may not have yet been scheduled.
I check every week, cause I'm afraid it's gonna get lost in the mail and I'm gonna miss out.
I don't know that any of us have confidence in the mail right now.
Right, right.
And with that, that does take time, and I know I commended the staff earlier, but they're working nights, mornings,
Yeah.
weekends, and we're
Yeah.
trying as fast as we can to accommodate all those people, so. Out of that 29,000, as of this morning, 4,047 of those have been taken care of. They've either came to the board, they've been settled informally, so we've seen those people and addressed those issues. So, 700, Mr. Cox is gonna go over this, but 779 went to the appraisal review board out of those 4,000. So the next item, in your packet, you have the organizational chart. As was stated earlier, we are down 4 employees, 1 customer service, 2 appraisers, a land appraiser and a residential appraiser, and then obviously the chief appraiser. So exemption status report. So as of June 8th, we have 3,209 outstanding homestead exemptions that still need to be processed. May, we processed 710 applications. That is low, but that's our busiest month of the year. Our office was flooded with people, as you can tell from the protest numbers. So, as stated earlier, I have gotten with Melissa. She's implemented a checks and balances and basically kind of a standard for those employees. And we will have those caught up by mid-August. Actually, we're hoping to do it sooner, but that's the projection as of right now. And then with any other applications that come in, that'll be the only backlog by then. So we should get current on that quickly. The other thing is the Truth in Taxation website. I know, Kristen, you talked to me about it, and so have you, Mr. Tyler. You wanna tell them what you found out from EIS?
Sure. So our current software vendor who also supplies our CAMA software is the one who currently supports our Truth in Taxation website, or the BTT website that was created, I think, by SB2 last year or previous year. And so currently, obviously, last year it was active and it's active this year. The big gripe that we're hearing is that they can't see the history of last year's. I reached out to our vendor about this and they informed me that because as of January 1st, they're transitioning all of their online services to a separate company called BIS, who we currently have a forms, software with to do. They're transitioning all of their online services to BIS. They had intended, since it had passed, that they were going to implement a new feature to show past history. Once they decided that they were gonna transition those services to another company, they stopped all development on their website. So that is why the past history is not currently available. We are transitioning to BIS for those online services, at which point the history will be available. The question really is, do we transition now so that that history is available and reach out to all of the entities and try to retrain them before they start having their meetings and posting all of their required data by law and learning a new website and learning a new format. With that being said, regardless of whether we actually transition to BIS early or later, it still will not provide any kind of estimate for the 2022 until the entities start uploading their tax information.
Right.
So it will not take 2022 values and estimate based off of 2021 tax rates or anything like that.
So, if for anyone that doesn't know, last year we have qualified and we were required to use this TNT website, Comal.Truth and Taxation, and it turned into a nightmare for a lot of people. This is the first time we sent the postcards out from the district. At the same time, the district took off the estimated values from their notices. Kind of a mess, but the purpose of the TNT website is to track the increase of rates or decrease of rates, the patterns of rates for each entity, and give you that estimated amount owed. And so it is a problem that there's not a history. We're dealing with the same thing with some of our software vendors moving to BIS also. They've lost history. We're kind of in a war right now with them on that to find it. But certainly it sounds inevitable to move to BIS. And having that history, having that data is what gives the taxpayers the ability to look. Even though it'll be inaccurate, and then a lot of the tax rates are going down because the values are going up, at least it gives the taxpayers an idea of how to budget moving forward. Before they get their bill. So having that history is vital. And it is very annoying that we don't have that right now.
So even if we go to BIS, it will not provide an estimate based off of 2022 values.
It'll have the history
it
of
will
the rates
have
and the values
of
that
the
they put in
rates.
the year before.
But it won't calculate it?
It will only show the data that was provided by the entities and the values for the same appraisal year. It will not take 2022 values
And
and
apply it to last
estimate
year's rates.
based off of last year's rates.
So you still have to go in and do the math yourself, but at least you're seeing the rates all in one location.
Because to your point, this year, as we know, the values went up so much, and if you use last year's rate, well, they're probably gonna lower their rate, so it's gonna estimate a higher tax base for you.
Right, and that's what I've tried to explain is, you know, the value did go up significantly. Using last year's rate is pretty unfair, but again, it's a resource for people who need to budget for these things.
So I guess the question that I would, the board is appointed to best represent the entities. So the question would be, should we go ahead, in the board's opinion, should we go ahead and transition to BIS now? And Ms. Hoyt, you know as well as I do, we worked pretty much as a team in trying to educate these entities and how to use that website in that format last year. Do we wanna do it right now in mid-June, when they're going to start having meetings and postings in the next month or so, a couple of months? Or should we wait and transition after, when we have more time to train?
I don't know. I use it, but I'm the one that probably uses it the most.
Yeah.
I know, it's been frustrating having to go back and forth between the two sites.
If we do, correct me if I'm wrong, if we do switch to BIS, it will generate that history for the 2021 year, so it will go 1 year back and start
At least let's do that, that's beneficial.
We can't do that unless we switch to the BIS. We won't do it on the current system because they stopped development.
From our understanding of the tax office side of things with Harris Government and BIS, it's like an inevitable change. BIS is taking over, they're buying out these softwares, I mean, so I say, you know, last year was our first year, it was a total pain and very challenging to get all these volunteers of these governing bodies to hop on and fill this information out, but I personally would say, let's just go ahead and do it, get it over with. They're only 1 year in, changing it at this point shouldn't, but the taxpayer has to relearn it too, and that's hard.
Yeah, we can definitely, go ahead and do the transition to the new site now as opposed to later,
That's just my opinion, I don't know what y'all think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge of it is that that's an additional, as I understand it correctly, additional burden that the taxing unit would have to learn, maybe it's inevitable, but, I'm not sure that's an action item we can take right now.
And, I mean, we can transition at any time that the board wants us to. What I would definitely recommend not doing is trying to transition after the entities start setting up their data in the current site.
Well, what I'm kinda thinking is that, and I don't remember when our next meeting is, but if we get some resolution, allow us to fill the visitor fill the entities in with what we're thinking, where we're headed, and then prepare them for that. But it's, I mean, they're gonna have to do it anyway, but.
That's what it sounds like to me, and I will tell you, we are prepping our email, our outreach, our initial outreach for the TNT process for July 1. So it is definitely not something that we can probably wait till the next meeting. I'm not pushing it right now, I don't care either way.
We're gonna be certified roll before the next meeting. The next meeting's August, right?
August.
Yeah.
Okay,
Certified
then-
roll, I mean, so yeah,
So yeah, waiting past July 1, 2, 3 or so is gonna be getting into, we need to start doing some business with it.
Did they give you a timeframe on switching?
They said it would only take, I mean, you know, this is a software company saying how long it's gonna take. But they said they could do it overnight and transition the site. I mean, that shouldn't be that big of a deal. I'm not trying to discourage the board from taking action, but I'm not sure that an action item is legally required for us to transition it. I mean, we can transition.
I
I don't think it needs board action.
Is there a cost difference involved?
Feedback.
There is, but we budget some of that just for kind of unforeseen upgrades and things like that when we budget for the Canvas system software. So it's about $2,000 to transition to the new, which we can cover. I mean, in what we budgeted specifically for Canvas systems.
To me, it's a comment I've heard multiple times, is the taxpayers need to figure out and estimate what this year.
No, I just wanna be clear, it is not going to estimate 2022.
100%.
Okay, alright,
It will only estimate 2022 once the rates are proposed and adopted by
And
the
entered by the
entity. And that's what, not mid-August?
Right, yeah.
At the earliest, so at that point, it will do the computer work for you.
Yes.
okay.
As
Although I like your set better, yours is a little more friendly. Not friendly, better looking.
Well, as of right now, like you stated, Mr. Couch, our next meeting's not till August 16th. So,
I don't, I mean, if we're transitioning anyway, this is a function of a retiring system, there's nothing we can do, we're not gonna spend money on something that's not being supported. So, I don't think there's any action to take besides we'll do it anyway.
Well, I mean, there's no action required by the board, we can move forward and we can transition within the bounds of the software agreements and everything that we have. I mean, the drop dead date on the software isn't until, I mean, it's pretty far out. I mean, it's.
But if they're not
yeah.
supporting.
I wouldn't recommend waiting that long, my concern was only the education of the entities, and even then, I think that as long as the tax office is willing to field some of those questions as well, like they were last year, I mean, we'll definitely put in all the effort to educate
Which is
the
why
entities.
I reckon,
Yeah.
July 1 is when we're gonna start
Yeah.
those communications with entities.
So we'll move forward with that.
Okay. The last thing on the agenda item, can you please have everybody confirm the 16th is appropriate for their schedules?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Kristen, you good? Okay. Awesome. All right, anything else on your report?
No, sir, that's all I have.
That takes us to, take a 2-minute break. Okay, sure. We will recess, well, depends on how popular the restrooms are, but let's say 10 minutes, cause it's pretty limited, so. 7:20, we'll start back in the morning. Liaison officer report.
Thank you, sir. To all the guests, I am the taxpayer liaison officer that they keep calling about. I do hope that this many people that are here go to the taxing entity meetings, because that's where they set the rates for taxes. And they were talking about the Truth in Taxation website. It also used to be a great resource for telling you when and where these meetings were, for them to set the agendas. So I hope that does get back on track. Here's our, I'm required by law to report information to the comptroller's office. So this is why we had this slide. We had 7 surveys, ARB surveys that were submitted and delivered to them. We get comment cards and letters, etc., from the people as they come in. We had 48 of those in May, and I can't see my number.
83 and 2.
83, okay. 83 of them rated the staff as their service is very good, and 2 of them were other than very good or good. I did, and they are in there. I did try to contact those people, but there was no contact information, so I don't know who did those. Had 2 formal complaints that I had to look into. In y'all's packet is the resolution, the letter that I sent to both of them. One of the complaints, Mr. Kimball, had a very similar complaint as this gentleman here had with the differences in terminology. And you know, I kind of summed up to him in a letter. I just said, I explained everything to him, and then I said, I understand with all the different technology used in correspondence and online how this gets confusing, and I hope I cleared it for him, and I assume I did. He never called me back. So I agree with you that when you go online and see appraised value, and it's really the market value, and then assessed value, which the code doesn't talk. I mean, I agree with you. It's what it does. I mean, the appraised value is what the code is talking about, can't rise 10%. And on the website, they use the word assessed value, and I understand that's confusing. And the board been made aware. I mean, they know about it. So, Mr. Booker talked about the exemptions, and I get a lot of calls on exemptions. I get a lot of property tax inquiries because they can't get to the Truth in Taxation website to find out what the rates are, how do I calculate, how do I budget. So these things are all being addressed, and the board's being made aware of it. I had 196 inquiries. You can see the difference between April and May. And of course, the protest season basically starts in May, so business is picked up. Business is good at the TLO office.
But as of today, they are all resolved.
Yeah, well, I don't have anything pending right now. They're usually questioned. A young lady over here is gonna contact me, and you know, if she needs 2 hours, I'll talk with her for 2 hours. No comments about me talking for 2 hours. Go ahead, Jeff. This is an example where Kristen, Jeffrey, Tony, wherever he went off to, we went up to Bulverde, to the library, to try to educate a lot of people, and we got a lot of good feedback from him. I think there's some letters that somebody else had in there that thanked everybody for doing it. But these are the types of things that we like to do when we're not in session. We don't want to take appraisers and stuff away right now, but when we're not, then that's what we want to do. The posters from last meeting or the meeting before, and the flyers for the title companies, Ms. Baptist, those are done. Those are getting out there. So, and I think Kristen wants a copy of my poster. Okay, so we'll take care of that. The Google stuff on Google, Lindsay now has ownership of that. I had to do some stuff to get ownership of that. And for the people that are here, I've talked with Jeff about this. As he mentioned in his statement, the district does a informal meeting as a courtesy. And from now on, they're gonna give them, when they come in for that informal, they will give them the evidence to discuss that if they request it. And that way, it kinda helps them, saves them on postage. So I think that issue, I've heard that issue. I mean, when people are calling me, I get that issue. Mr. Booker's been made aware of the issue, and so he's trying to take that and address it. So I think that's all I got today.
Yeah, one of the ones.
And it would be the day Ryan's not here, who always says, how long are you gonna be?
I wanna thank you. Tony just walked out. I was hoping he'd still stay in here.
All right, Tony.
I'm done.
Oh. Tony, I wanted to thank you, Larry, Kristen, for your community outreach. Kristen, you've been very proactive with that. We know that education is huge. It's been mentioned once before on how can we get out and learn these things. We're trying to target. One of the things we can't do is solicit engagements. We can provide speakers, but we can't solicit that. So we try to, anytime we can, whether it's realtors or city council, HOAs, anything we can do to get out in the community, we do. We're just at the mercy of them contacting us. We can't contact them, so. But thank you very much. I know those are a time commitment, taking you away from here, but, I mean, as you can see in the letters back here, they've been very much appreciated. And I also did not want to go to the next agenda item without stopping for a moment on the comment cards. As you know, we've got tremendous amount of protests this year, a lot of confusion, a lot of different things, but what is very consistent across the board is how well the staff is interacting. You've heard it from citizens here tonight, so make sure you're taking that back. We understand that it may not always be the answer everybody wants to hear, but delivering it with professionalism and understanding is huge, so thank you very much for that. Please exchange that back to the staff.
Yes, sir.
All right, agenda item, any comments from the board on Larry's presentation? Okay, all right, agenda item number 7, which Mr. Sweeney is gonna present. If you wouldn't mind giving just a little bit of backstory about what we requested from you and then the resolution.
A gentleman spoke at the last meeting when I was here saying that you were misapplying the homestead cap, I believe it was implication, because it should come off assessed or appraised value, that should be the appraised value. What he said was essentially correct, but the best I can tell, no one's tax is being miscalculated. I think you're just using some terms on your website that is not the same term that the code uses. Section 23.23 is the code section that says that homesteads can't be raised more than 10% annually on their appraised value. And by section 1.0489, something like that, appraised value is by definition the value derived under chapter 23. And so what you do, the appraisal district is required to find a market value and report that to the comptroller. And from that value, deduct or limit the 10% for the homesteads. And it's more complicated than that, but that's the simple version of it. And that value is called the appraised value. And what your website calls that assessed value. Now, what's the difference? Frankly, nothing. The code defines assessed value as the appraised value times the assessment ratio. Well, we did away with assessment ratios 40 years this year ago. And so, by definition, assessed value and appraised value are the same thing. But if you look in many sections of the code, because it's been amended haphazardly, frankly, the legislature sometimes uses the term assessed value the same way as what it really means is taxable value. And I know now I've probably totally confused the situation, but the bottom line is the appraised value of a property, by definition, is when it comes to a homestead with a 10% cap, is the number that is 10% limited. And but you're doing it in the right order, because the exemptions come off after the appraised value. And so that's why it creates that inverse anomalous situation that Mr. Booker was talking about. That only occurs with the percentage homestead.
Okay.
All the other homesteads. So why does Harris Governor use that term? I don't know. I can tell you that the term assessed value is used much more liberally in other states. And Harris Governor is a multi-state organization, so my guess is, it's just, they're just adopting a term that's fairly universal. And so, anyway, the bottom line is I don't think anyone's taxes are miscalculated. The term appraised value and assessed value, at least by definition in the code, really means the same thing.
Should we consider changing that though?
I personally would. I would recommend it simply for confusion's sake. I wish we would just do away with the term assessed value anyway, because it doesn't mean anything anymore. Like I said, we did away with assessment ratios 40 years ago.
Is that, Jeffrey, is that in a Harris Govern
Yes.
setup issue? Because Harris Govern produces the notices, and that's their formula and whatnot. So, but can they change it to match the code?
That's something that we would have to discuss with them.
We can reach out, usually, correct me if I'm wrong, but past history, usually because they service so many appraisal districts, that if it's not a unanimous or tons of appraisal districts are requesting them, some of those things they usually don't change, but we can definitely ask them and reach out to them.
Again, I suspect it's because they're using that in other states, which again, use the term assessment way more liberally than we do.
Yeah, I spot checked a few just adjacent counties, and they were similar. Same with Harris Governor. Okay.
That's the scoop on it.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the board?
If they couldn't change it, would there be a way we could asterisk or add an explanation either on the notice or on our webpage or something, so that we could clarify that for people? I think that's next week. I don't know.
Now, by putting that on there, are we making things even more difficult?
So is it, to clarify, is it the notice or the website or both? Is it just the website? I know they're both produced by Harris Govern, I guess, but.
as far as I mean, I honestly don't know. No, I mean, to be honest with you, what's in our software matches what's on our website. And the only difference that I can find in all of those terms is that on the notice, it doesn't actually call the assessed value, it calls it the value after homestead cap reduction or something like that. And so I'm not real sure where, from the software side of it, but I mean, we can definitely reach out to Harris Govern and ask them why they're calling it what they are, if they can back it up with anything in the code, and if it doesn't match the code, try to get it clarified or fixed.
I think if we just ask.
Sure.
The answer may be no, and that's just part of the software vendor piece. And then we'll go from there.
Mr. Tyler, the notice of appraised value that is sent out by the district to the property owner does use the correct terminology of appraised value.
Okay.
It's the website that is using, assessed value.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Larry.
We'll definitely reach out.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds easy, but, I mean.
Well, we're gonna transition our website hosting to BIS, so maybe we'll be able to fix it through them.
Okay, thank you, Spring. All right, presentation by the ARB chairman of the 2022 protest season.
Good evening. For those of you who may not know me, my name is John Cox, and I am the chairman of the Appraisal Review Board. We began hearing 2022 protests back on May the 9th. The vast majority of the notices went out, I think, around April the 8th, and they started getting some of these protests for the 2022 season on May the 9th. We were meeting Monday through Thursday at that time, which was the same as we did all of last year. And as more and more protests came pouring in, starting immediately after Memorial Day, we added Friday. And we will continue to be 5 days a week until we're done, whenever that is. Mr. Booker spoke to the vast number of protests filed this year. They have been sending out the 14-day notices to somewhere around 100 different people for each calendar day. Some of those have settled through the informal process during that 14-day period. That total through yesterday, 779 people were scheduled on the day of their hearing to be heard by the board. Of those 779, 371 of them had a change in their value. Their value was lowered. Some of those were based on the evidence brought in by the protester. Some of those were based on the evidence created by the district that they recommended a lower value than their notice value. But
What was that number, 300 and what?
371. One number that I cannot explain, I do not understand. 316 people were no-shows. 40% of the people who were on the docket on any given day didn't show up. I do not understand that. If they protested, why didn't they come? I don't know. 92 people had no change. And that happens typically when they come into the room and the only thing they say is, my taxes are too high. We have no evidence to change their value if that's all they bring. And unfortunately, that happens. I might also go a little bit further. Back in January, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. So I have not been able to be here on Fridays because I'm taking her for her chemo treatments. Ms. Loie Pope, Mr. Rick Tobias have stepped in. She's the vice chairman and the secretary. They need to be recognized.
2023?
We have 11 members plus myself. If we have 3 panels with 3 people each, plus myself, we need 10 people here. Unfortunately, 6 of us, counting myself, are not able to be here all 5 days of the week. We have one guy that's only able to be here 1 day a week. So if any of you hear from people about, hey, let's get on the ARB, tell them to call Larry, call me. We'd like to hear from them. We do have some openings. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Comment, thank you both very much. Very much appreciated. Mr. Cox, I know you and I have spoke. We don't expect you to do anything but what you need to do. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. That will take us to agenda item, excuse me, number 9. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, thank you. So, in here is the profit and loss budget performance for January through May of 2022. This time of year is kind of an odd time of year because we have certain contracts that get paid out early in the year for the whole year. But then, a lot of our things are paid quarterly or even monthly, so it can sometimes skew the numbers a little bit on what this is. However, so if any of y'all have any questions about any of the items that we actually have in here, everything is falling pretty much in line with a couple of exceptions, and the first ones that I'm going to say are gonna be on page 2. They're very low value.
What about media sales?
Yeah, okay, so thank you for bringing that up. Media sales is wrong. That's not the right number, obviously. We did not have $421,000 in media sales. That was a mistype error on how we coded that money. It is real money that is there, but it is actually the fund balance from the 2021 year. And when we had put that in a CD just for the interim until the audit, and we brought it back from that CD and put it back into the operating fund, we coded it the wrong code, so it's showing up as media sales. It is not, it will be fixed, and it will go back to its rightful place, and I guarantee you, based on what the audit says, it will go back to the entities being board approval, so, thank you for that.
Couldn't resist, man. Sorry. Blinkering.
I thought we got creative.
Yeah, really. It's like, let's keep selling some more of that.
Yeah, right, whatever media we're selling, we'll have no budget problems, right? So, in light of kind of budgeting, up for utilities a little bit for the 2023 year, we are seeing some 2022 increases in our utilities. They're not major, it's water and gas, they're low amount items, but, as those costs go up to provide those services, obviously, it's gonna be something that increases. Most likely, water and gas will exceed what we budgeted for the year, so. Going down farther, let's see, computers and software is at 74.34% spent, that's the bottom of page 2, however, we expend most of those funds at the beginning of the year to cover, PC rotation, and things of that nature. It actually happened a little bit later than this year, because we ordered all of our PCs in January, and we didn't get them till last week, so, those are supply chain issues, if I've ever seen them. Really on page 3, on page 3 in 8,200 postage expenses, there is, it looks like there's a lot of money spent, there is, but that's because a lot of that money is for notice of appraised value postage. We're gonna get another big hit probably by the next time we have a board meeting, when we send out the truth and taxation website postcards. That's a pretty big ticket item that we're required to send to every taxpayer, so you'll see that number really jump depending on what meeting we're in.
Those are the classic unfunded mandate, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so, the postcards, they started that last year when they first adopted the website, and we had to send out about 83,000 of them, and even at a postcard rate, that money adds up pretty quick, it's about $20,000 to $25,000.
And those are you're planning to put those out when? August?
No, I believe we're doing it by July 7th, which is actually I think we're gonna do it a little bit earlier than that, but isn't July 7th the
code?
required?
Or as soon as
date?
they're after practical?
Yeah, I think we're gonna try to do it around July 1st.
Right.
So, and I think that kind of falls in line with this. You wanna see?
I wanna see them.
Okay.
They have my name on them, so that's how I wanna see them.
Hope they spell it right, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And also, in the postage line, we also, since we have I guess, I don't know if it's a commercial postage machine, but we have a postage machine, we actually have to put money into that so that we can run postage daily. So there is money there in that machine here as well, so, but obviously that comes out of the budget when we fund that machine. So down at 8,600, which is towards the bottom of page 3, we're at 74.46% of our legal services. We have so far to this date spent around $205,000 in legal services. Now, that does not include the HR consultation, which is also our HR legal services, which was not budgeted for the 2022 year. So really, those two numbers combined come out to around the, what is that, $218,000 in legal services, which puts us, what we budgeted was $275 for the 2022. That's something that we definitely need to keep in mind. Appraisal services is normal, that's things like Pritchard and Abbott that do some of our commercial appraisal, we pay them quarterly, so that's on track to do what it's supposed to. Again, a really low amount, but I just want to point out our bank analysis fees, so we're not earning enough interest on our money in our bank to actually cover any of the fees that we have. So it's not a large amount, but it's something that usually doesn't go over, and depending on what interest rates do, different things like that, as far as our credit that we get off of our operating funds.
And there's specific locations that we have to place those savings, correct?
Well, what he's talking about is the earnings credit that you get to offset your maintenance fees, if you will, as commercial operating. We ought to be seeing a change in that coming up with the way that Fed's been increasing rates and other things, to where we might get to an earnings credit that will offset those bank fees. If Frost had to do that across the board, they would just get hammered. But what you're talking about is the sweep account where you're moving, and I think Ryan and I talked about that, about utilizing their sweep account at Frost to be able to pull that into the government bond securities. It's still pretty liquid. Again, there's not much return on that yet, but those are changing. We need to have a conversation in regards to our investment policy, because there's some really good liquid investments that are hitting the market now. They're paying 3, 4, 5%. So they're within our investment policy.
Certainly.
I was surprised that fuel, wasn't higher, are you guys?
That's
What's-
typically higher starting around August.
So
We did a little appraisal field work early in the year, but once protest season hits, there's really not a lot of people going on, so come August, September, you'll see that change.
Are we kind of accounting or recognizing how much gas has increased? And
Yeah, so.
I mean, it's not a huge part of the budget.
No, but still, so, when we look at money that that's money that we budgeted, but, generally speaking, based off of what we spent in our last year on vehicle expenses, because we account not just for fuel, but we account for oil changes, and if something breaks or anything like that to repair those vehicles, I think that we have, enough money to cover the fuel.
And a lot of the vehicles are still under warranty, so that extra money in there, we really don't need for repairs and things like that as of right now.
Digital processing is on track at $30,000. That'll take another big jump when we do our postcards and things like that. That all comes out with generating those letters and those types of documents. On page 4 in aerials, we're at 98.86%. That's a contract that's fully paid already in the year, so that's not gonna be any issue. Our insurance insurance, bonding, that's where we put all of our notaries. So in order to try to streamline and get the most out of our employees, we're actually getting our appraisers that are working the boards to become notaries so that they don't have to have an additional person helping work the boards. We're just trying to get every hour of work that we can out of our staff. So again, not a lot of money, but it just goes to show that we're making small steps to try to streamline other parts of the budget as well. And then appraisal review board, this is gonna be an item that we're gonna need to keep an eye on just because of the sheer number of protests that we have. So it doesn't look bad right now, but it can get up there depending on how this protest season goes.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions about that? The next page should be just the collateralization page. I did contact Bank of New York before, or Bank of New York Mellon before anybody says anything. They still have the previous chief appraiser's name as the intention on there, so we get that fixed. But our agreement with Frost is that they collateralize all of our funds at 130%. So this is
103 or 130?
130.
Wow.
So this actually shows that they are doing that based on
Yeah, sure.
the agreement.
Why? Are we paying extra for that?
So Larry Hammonds, who's our bank rep, is, when I talked to him, he is saying that that's not costing us anything additional. It's something that they're doing because of the way that we receive our quarterly payments.
Right.
And we can get a large, bulk injection of cash from, especially from the larger districts like Comal ISD or Comal County. So they just wanna make sure at any given time that there's money to cover the deposits that we make. I mean,
So the county's at 102% with a 50 million swing. So when they hit those big deals, that extra up to 50 million will kick in on that collateralization. But if we're not paying any more for it, I don't guess it really matters.
the last time I talked to Larry about this, when the collateralization was brought up at, I don't think it was last meeting, but maybe 2 meetings ago, he indicated that we were not paying any additional fees for that, so. Any other questions for Dave?
That's what you're on 102.
So the next portion is just again, we're still in the second quarter, so this is really just an update, but I decided to do an investment update every single meeting as opposed to just limiting it to the quarter. So it's really just an update from May 10th to June 14th. The summary page is gonna look a little different than what it normally does because we are following kind of what we laid out the last meeting as far as getting some of those CDs as they mature and liquidating them into the savings account so that we can start looking into these other liquid options. We've got 4 CDs that have matured. One just matured yesterday, 2 on June 6th, and 1 on May 17th. So we're really just getting access to those funds to really look at other options right now as far as those investments. As far as everything else lines out, you're gonna see that the savings account is added on there from Randolph Brooks because that's where those funds are getting deposited, so I wanna make sure that we're reporting that in accordance with what we're supposed to. We currently have a total number of investments of $247,464.06. And to Mr. Couch's point, we've only earned $84.83 on those funds since the last reporting date, which was May 10th. So there's definitely room for us to look at some other options on improving the return on those while being prudent with the level of funds.
Cryptocurrency.
Oh, yeah.
You probably understand that more than I do.
I don't understand it at all, that's why I'm joking.
So does anybody have any questions about the investments?
I do not. Thank you, Ryan. All right, next up is agenda item number 9, which is discussion and possible action regarding the TCDRS plan assessment for 2023.
Yes, sir. So in y'all's packet, you should have a copy of the plan. It lays out the employees' deposit rate matching. So our required rate is 13.91%. In 2022, our required rate is 15.01%, so that has gone down a little bit. Our elected rate that we do go by is the 20%. So fully, the funded ratio for this is we're at 88.1%.
That's good. Real good.
The only other thing I'll note is you'll see the notes at the bottom. So retirees from the district, haven't received a COLA since 2009. Which, yeah, if we wanna make changes to this, that has to be done by December 15th. Now, if we start, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, if we start messing with a COLA for retirees people, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but that does affect our funded rate. So,
What's typical for, COLA adjustments for retirees?
I wasn't involved with it when it went to 2009. You might have a little more.
I was not here in 2009 either, obviously, but I've heard from other districts who they have just, it is a wide spectrum of what they do for COLAs. There's districts that don't do any retirement COLAs, there's some that do it religiously every 3 years or 5 years. Some say that they haven't done it in 10 years, so it's really all over the board on what they do. And I honestly, I don't know what a typical percentage increase is. There's two different ways that TCDRS does it. You can do it by a flat rate where everyone gets a specific percentage increase. And then there's a CPI rate that you can do a percentage of the inflation rate over the years, and that affects each retiree differently. We have not really had an opportunity to reach out to them to get, we did reach out to them, but we hadn't gotten any, I guess, samples or evading me, estimates on if we do this, what it will do. So, yes.
Does the county do
We were just
any
talking about-
adjustments?
So it's just something for the board to keep in mind.
Okay. Alright. So what is for approval then?
If you want.
The assessment, basically it's TCDR plan assessment for the year 2020.
Gotcha. Okay. Would you mind going through a little bit of the plan details and how it works?
Sure, so that's what Pam was talking about earlier, where we pay into a pool and the retirees are funded by that pool. Like Mr. Couch said, the 88.1%, that's, I think a couple of years ago, we were a little higher than that, we were in the 90s.
I remember being like right at the 90s.
Yeah.
90.3.
I remember being at 74.
We worked on that.
Yeah. That's part of the reason you only haven't taken since 09.
Right. And so, I mean, if, basically the eligibility, I mean, it states it in there, age 60, if you're at age 60, it's vesting with 8 years of service. There's a rule of 75, which totals your age in years of service, or at any age with 20 years of experience, gets you eligible for retirement. And you're vested at 8 years.
It works very much like an annuity, in how we do it, with the vesting and everything else. Your payouts, you choose lump sum, or, now are you, through TCDRS, I'm assuming you're getting 7% annual,
Yes.
earnings also,
Yes.
right?
Alright, board have any questions, comments?
No. Good job on that funded ratio, and that's always a concern. You know what the county's is by chance? I guarantee it's lower than that.
Nancy, the one who was here, but
John.
Right? When we started, it's like.
I was saying that to y'all.
2006. It was like 74%, Gary Bolton worked real hard to get that up. Believe it or not, Gary. Yeah, it was his baby. I make the motion that we approve the, TCDRS plan assessment for 2023.
A second.
favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries. Item number 11. Discussion and possible action to approve the Comal Appraisal District 2023 budget.
So do y'all have any any more questions about the budget?
I think let's go back and address, the employee numbers that we kind of talked about in the, hearing.
Sure.
I know you had some thoughts specifically on maybe some positions that we might not want to include this year.
So, I don't know if they were suggestions, I mean, they were more of new things that were added that weren't in the previous budget that are driving up that higher percent increase. You know, we kind of talked earlier, what would happen if we were fully staffed and how much would that productivity rise? I think being fully staffed would definitely cut down on the number of employees that this district would need. I do think out of all the employees, we do need the office assistant that's in there, that's why it's wasn't listed on the information I gave y'all. Well, let me go over this, because we did redo, I did send you information on education, lowering that from 52,000 to 34,000. So we went back and readdressed the employees that do still need to go to schooling. But in that 52, Lindsay, when she re-ran it and we looked at it, we weren't accounting for employees that were gonna be going to school in 2022. So that'll come out of the 2022 budget. So that decreased to 34,000, I think will be plenty of funds to fund the employees going to school.
All right, and then, sorry, Kristen.
What is the procedure, for adding a position in the middle of the year?
It would be a budget amendment.
A budget amendment, so.
Not ideal.
I know it's not ideal, but again, we are in a major transition period, there's a lot of unknowns. And again, back to the pay scale, revamp, or whatever, reconsideration,
Just, that's in there, by the way.
Okay.
There is it's a 1% adjustment, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that they still haven't presented it formally for review. But that is in the numbers as a potential if we elect to move forward with it. Does that help? Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I think that's great, but I think as far as, getting to know the staff that are presently here, whether if there's any reorganization of the structure, I know that I went through that with the tax office, how do you move people around to make it more efficient, and we always go through that,
So, what we've done in the past is, say y'all did want to add one new customer service specialist to the staff. You would start that as an August hire date or halfway through, which would cut it in half, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To kind of add for the middle of the year. That's an option that we can throw around as well.
You would almost be limited to that anyway, if they're coming with experience. I would assume they wouldn't want to leave the previous employer at a very high demand time.
Sure. Unless that's why they're leaving.
Well, I would hope, I'm trying to be somewhat sympathetic. Whether it works or not is a whole other thing. Okay.
So is this, what is your ask? I mean, I think that I've only been on this board for a year and a half, but I would
So-
like to know, I think everybody else would like to know, what do you really think you need? I mean, what do you really want?
My ask is for sure for that office assistant. Mr. Tyler told me this the other day. You know, there's essentially 4 people that have looked at, addressed, and put input into this budget over the past few months. So I really think, as I stated earlier, we need kind of an assessment period to really see what we do need and see how it goes through. Like I said with Melissa, we're implementing something that should get us caught up on all that. I wouldn't want to get an employee, and by the time they're hired, they have no work that needs to be done. That's my look at it.
I'm cautious because there is a lot of changes, there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of these other demands. I hate to cut short and need it and have to go through the budget amendment process versus potentially put it in there, you know, with reason. And then just not leverage it if not needed.
Sure.
I know that's also difficult, because, you know, the taxing entities are assuming that it's a budget item, and then it comes back to them, but still, I know it's not a perfect scenario any direction. But those are just some thoughts that I had.
Sure.
Well, I know that's,
No, go
so I
ahead.
know that that's one thing that, Mr. Poker and I have, we've been spending a lot of hours on this budget, going over it with a fine tooth comb and looking at what we need and what we may possibly need, and there's a lot of questions, obviously, which I understand that you have too. There's the green staff having less experience as, you know, there's the previous high turnover rate, which causes an influx of employees. There's restructuring of the office, getting staff where we need them to be to do the most work efficiently. So if the board wanted to move forward with something like that, it would be a commitment from the district, or from our side of the district, saying that, we'll gather those metrics during this assessment period, we'll see where we are, and we will only hire those staff if they are actually needed, instead of just putting bodies in the chairs just because we have them. That's never been my mentality when working the appraisal district budget. You can ask any employee here, whenever it comes to somebody who's trying to save $1, I'm constantly looking at this, and we're not just gonna spend the money just because we have it. So that is an option, but it is an upfront cost to the entities during this time of development that,
Right.
you know.
Jeffrey, let me ask this question. I mean, last year, we got, 20 and 21, we got hit with commercial increase, large commercial increases.
Sure.
Large influx of people that came last year were commercial protests.
Right.
Now we obviously have been behind the 8 ball with residential, and that's what we're feeling the brunt of now. Look, I think we only had, what, 3,000 protests for commercial properties and
Yeah, so
most of the rest.
commercial ones which are primarily by agents, those increased by about 3,000, and property owners, that's where the 10,000 came from, with the extra protests from the year before.
So we're kind of working through that glut from 2021 and now 2022. I don't see the same issue coming in 2023. In fact, if anything, we might see it go a little bit the other way based on what's going on both in the real estate market and everywhere else. I mean, so how much of this?
Hopefully we've caught up enough with our values to where you don't see these drastic increases. It's more maintaining and actually following what the market is doing from year to year.
So with that being said, would we be better served sucking it up, if you will, this year, knowing that we're not gonna need those people next year? The last thing I wanna do is bring some people on, a budget for some people, all of a sudden doesn't have any work, and I think that's what you're alluding to
Absolutely.
as well.
It's doable. I mean, this office, years ago, it was understaffed quite a bit, and we were still getting all the work done. I mean, we might have some unhappy employees, but I think we have good employees now that they see the issues, and, I mean, they were taking it upon themselves to do extra work to make sure it's getting done. So I think it's a very doable thing.
So if we got to a fully staffed office like we've been budgeting for in the past, and we're able to add that 1 or 2 more key people that we're looking at.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that will get us through the 2023 year?
I do. I even talked to Lindsay Whitty, who's the Assistant Director of Operations, and she said if she's down 1 staff member, and for the appraisal cycle, if she has all 10 of her appraisers, she's confident that they can get all of it done and be efficient, so.
Another concern I have is on that refund that goes back to the entity, and y'all may be able to, you may know better, Nancy, how you sort of Comal board. Does that really go back, is that really factored back in, to next year's budget, or does it go into a fund that's?
They factor it back in, it's like a little bonus.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
great
that
when it's,
discounts the
I
burden
mean,
for the tax.
it's nice to know, obviously, like we said, you need to like have it come, but if it comes back, it's good as well, so.
If you look at the cost of living across the nation, it's up over 8% right now. So as I apply that to our budget, I look at it and say, okay, we've gotta look at some kind of number similar to that, just to keep pace with what's going on in the country.
Sure.
And then I have to look at what's our growth within our community, which we obviously know that growth rate. I mean, we're still one of the top 5 growth counties in the nation.
Right.
And that's not stopping. People come in here for all kinds of reasons, including our low tax rates. So that number, as I look at it, when somebody starts telling me 11-12%, I'm going, that ain't out of line. I mean, I don't like it any more than anybody else, but realistically, it's not out of line. You know, if we were a declining market, that'd be a whole different story.
Sure.
Well, what is,
It's not there.
what's the last time, I mean, if you can track how many employees you've had per year and then track the percentage of growth over the years, is it kind of, you know, does the 10% increase in the budget or the percentage of the parcels versus the amount of people serving those parcels, has that increased proportionately, I guess? And then if not, we need to catch up.
No. How many employees did we get last year?
I don't know off the top of my head.
You need to
but
borrow my
I-
Prevagen?
What's that?
Do you need some of my Prevagen? Remember?
What I do know off the top of my head is that we had a stagnated employee count for many years leading up to around 2017. And then we started injecting employees at a relatively high rate in order to get up to where we are now, which is that fully staffed will be around 37. As Mr. Bucker pointed out earlier, if we add 1 staff next year, we're looking at around 3,000 parcels per full-time employee. I like to use parcel counts compared to population counts because I know that population affects things, certain things, but I think it's a good metric in appraisal districts to use. It's really hard to gauge it right now because of all of the variable factors that we have with turnover and the new staff and things like that. I mean, we can say we're behind, so we need more staff because of development. But I don't really have anything that I could show you that says that if we had all of our staff and they actually had a year or 2 of experience under their belt, that we would be understaffed. I don't have anything to show that. I know that we have a lot of litigation right now that we're working on. I'm not involved in that, but I know that we're working on getting some of that stuff resolved and curbed. So how does that affect how many staff we have and the man hours that we're gonna put in? Are we gonna have as much of that left over? There's just a lot of questions that move into whoever lands into the administration and how all that is going to be righted.
What I think the district's gotten bad at is, we're behind, we need more staff. Well, instead of looking into the situation and seeing where the flaw is to improve it, doesn't necessarily mean we need more staff, kind of like the exemption example. If we stay on track, we can get that caught up within 3 months and keep moving smoothly.
That's great. That's what we have observed, or I think have come
We've
to
observed that
recognize as well.
Yeah, same with the tax office, you had the influx of the refunds due to 2020, and we got far behind, and it's been kind of great to see where we are now versus last year, and how it was hard. They were overworked during the day, but you know, they grinded and got it done, and now everything's back to a normal pace.
And you know, well-trained staff, they can do multiple positions or help pitch in when you're slammed in one area, and they're willing to work together as a team, which I think Chris worked on too when he first came in, so, yeah. It's morale and a lot of other things.
Absolutely.
So the question is, going back, well, your question is, what is that number? I don't think we're probably debating much other than what additional employees do we add, or what additional employees do we cut from the proposed budget?
Or do we leave it as is and then not use them if we determine?
Well, exactly, we wouldn't be, I mean, obviously Jeffrey's not gonna add, or whoever is not gonna add them.
Right.
If there's not that need for them, we're gonna replace what's missing first.
There's clearly an obligation that we all have to the public and to our entities, as well as the service of the CAD. Which is why I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but, you know, I would love
love to just see, ask for what you want, and I feel like that was not done prior. And there's a lot of, once the budget was approved, I heard there were more positions needed, and I'm like, well, why didn't you just come from the get-go and just shoot us straight and tell everybody what you need, and so if you can really put it out there.
And I guess the hard part is for me, I've only been in this position
Yeah, no,
for a short time, and I've been here a long time, and I've seen several things, but I don't exactly know in each department where an issue is or what needs to be addressed to see if there can be more productivity, or do we actually need an employee in that position?
And I know this budget was set by the prior leadership.
Yes.
Or
Portions of it.
portion of it.
I made the comment earlier that he's like the third or fourth hands that have touched it, so I know that it's, and this year is not an easy year.
Right.
Sure.
So if I may, Tony Badilla with the Commercial PPP Department. In discussions with Ryan that we had in the previous months and Jeff and that we've had, so at least in the Department of Commercial PPP, we have our staff members that do both commercial and PPP. As difficult as that is to transition from one to another, over time, because that was requested before, over time, we've gone back to more of a traditional, this is your specialized field, this is your specialized field, and what's happened is that we've got an increase in productivity. So initially, before, where I was the one saying, well, I need an extra appraiser, at this point, it appears that even though we've got two literally brand new appraisers in commercial department, one person has less than 7 months experience and is catching on fast. And there's a lot of work that's going in within to develop individuals that will stay with us. I think that the hardest